Cam Ward has been sensational. Top graded Power 4 quarterback so far, but it takes more than a quarterback to have the type of start Miami is having. Who have been the big surprises?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Dono, University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, co-host of Locked On ACC, and thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. On this loaded episode of Locked On Canes, we're going to talk later on with a USF alum, Tito Bonach from Action Network, about the USF Bulls and the threats that they can present to Miami this Saturday. From our first guest, we're going to get a Malachi Tony scouting report. Standout American Heritage receiver has reclassified. He is going to be joining the Miami Hurricanes in 2025 instead of 2026. And we'll also talk about the Canes standouts so far. We have the pleasure to be joined with our boy Blue, Larry Bluestein, 560 WQAM, Prep, Red Zone, Florida, the Six Ring Cane podcast. And so, Blue, as I mentioned at the top, it obviously takes more than a quarterback to have the start Miami has had. Who are the players that have surprised you or jumped off the page so far?
Well, thanks for having us, Alex. And certainly, you take a look at guys that, are obvious, like O.J. Frederique from St. Thomas Aquinas, a guy that, they were pleased about getting. And then all of a sudden, when he came aboard and was there, a lot of the coaches were looking at him and saying, wait a minute, this kid is a little bit more than everybody thought he was. He was quick. He was smart. He was kind of a sponge when it came to picking up things, a physical kid. And that's the one thing that, when you talk to some of the players and the coaches over there, that he kind of just swept them off their feet because of the fact that they figured, okay, he's going to come in. He's going to be a project type of guy. We'll have him on, second year or so. And here he is against Florida Gators, and he started. So, guys like him, you mentioned Jaden Harris, obviously, is a guy. I think, I don't know if he's a surprise, but somebody who I think, everybody kind of knew if you watched him at Tennessee Day, he was going to be special. But I'm telling you right now, there are very, very few defensive ends in the country like Tyler Barron. I can tell you right now, he's a first round draft pick, top 15, top 10 even. The guy has just been sensational. He's just he's a disruptor. Reminds me, of some of the really, really good football players. Jalen Phillips comes to mind because, here's a guy that came in for a year, kind of dominated things. Also, let me stay on defense. A couple of guys that really surprised me may not have been starters, but when they come in, and you and I have talked about Popo for years, since he signed, and Raul Aguirre has been, every time he's called upon, he gets in there and makes a tremendous impact. You look at some of these players, it's not all about the starters. Obviously, you want to talk about guys like Mish Powell, who's had a really good start, and a guy who I think is sensational. Elijah Alston, who's really had a tremendous, he's a guy at platoons with Tyler Barron. We all kind of knew that, that Bain would be the guy, but also Akeem Mesidor, who we kind of knew is kind of shaking off injuries over the past. Offensively, you got to give Markel Bell some play, because here's a guy that had to go in for Rivers. He may have had a penalty or so, but he certainly has held his own. He's a big kid. He's kind of feeling his way in. But I think when you have guys like that you could use, in a pinch, And I thought he's really come down. I agree with you about Zach Carpenter. This is we all thought it would be a huge drop off after Lee, who obviously was one of the best centers Miami's had in a long, long time, even though we got a chance to see him for a year. But those are the guys that kind of jump out. You could always say, a guy, like obviously Jordan Lyle comes to mind. Here's somebody that was inserted in game one, and he really came through. So those are some of the kids, I think, Alex, that have kind of stood out. I think everybody's played a role in being, getting off to this great start, though.
No, I love it. And Blue, I know for this matchup with Miami versus USF, it's got to be a super interesting one to you because, obviously you've covered a lot of players in high school who play at Miami. Same thing with USF. They've got a lot of in-state, South Florida talents on that football team. And I know you're friendly with Coach Golish up there at USF. So who are some of the players and just some of the aspects of USF's game? Because they're playing good football, Blue. What does Miami have to watch out for on Saturday?
Well, obviously, you start at quarterback where they have a guy, obviously, who did a tremendous job last year, coming in at the end. We kind of saw him at the end of the year. This is a guy that, really made an impact, and somebody in the Byrum Brown who did an excellent job. I think other guys to really watch out for, they got some new faces on the team as well. But a kid that I watched when he was 9 and 10 years old is probably the story in college football right now because of the fact that here's a guy like Naquan Wright, who was one of the best running backs in Dade County at Miami Carroll City, went to the University of Florida, played there for 3 years, was a role player, never said anything. He got his degree, left, went to USF, and he's in his second year. He's got a master's degree. This is a kid that doesn't come from the best of, upbringings, and for him to overcome that. And he's the hardest running back that I've seen. He has put last week, against Alabama, he almost put their safety in the concussion protocol. He's done that. And I remember when he was in high school and they played Central, he actually put 2 defensive backs into concussion protocol because of the fact that, he runs real hard. Another guy that a lot of people might not be, familiar with, but he's another South Floridian, their kicker, John Cannon, who actually won a lot of the competitions when he went up against Borregales and, in the early days in high school. I think somebody like that has an opportunity. Mac Harris, who's at linebacker for him, had an opportunity to watch him throughout high school. There's a lot of faces like Brent Austin, who's new. He's a cornerback for them. Also, Kawan Banks. So they got kids, and obviously the difference maybe between them, Alex, and, a couple of the other teams that, like UCF, usually that's their big rival. But because of the fact that UCF's recruiting at a Power 4 level now, being in the Big 12. USF may not be getting that player yet, but as you mentioned, Alex Golish is a really good coach. Everywhere he's been, whether it be at Tennessee, where he's the offensive coordinator, or now, he has that belief like Mario Cristobal. And you could see when he went to shake Kalen DeBoer's hand the other last week against Alabama, or 2 weeks ago against Alabama, he wasn't a happy camper. Even though they lost, sometimes you go up there, in a place like Tuscaloosa and you come away after playing really, really good for a half and you feel good. He didn't feel good. And that's one of the things that believes that he's going to have this team ready. Do they have the talent Miami has? No, not close. But a lot of strange things happen when you're well prepared. You come out, they're going to have fan support. It's going to be packed. Obviously, a lot of Miami fans. So USF is a type of team that, I from what I understand, in 2 years, 26, they'll be joining the ACC or the Big 12, which is only right. They're the largest media market in Florida, the Tampa Bay area, because they have far-reaching down south and they go up north and all the way towards the Orlando area. So I think it's a team that obviously is on the grow and they're recruiting well. They do a lot of camps. I was over there for 4 days, saw 2 of their mega camps and also 2 of their 7-on-7s. They attract a lot of kids. And now when they get to that next level with the new facility and with the new stadium that they're planning building on campus, it's a program you're going to keep an eye on. But you know what? For them to keep goalish, it's going to be tough because there's going to be a lot of demands for a guy like that. And, certainly we saw that with Lane Kiffin down at FAU. When a school wants you, and especially an SEC type of school, they're going to outbid, most programs.
Well, we get a ton of information here from Larry Bluestein, and I want to talk some recruiting when we come back, because Miami has a standout player who is committed to the U. It's going to be class of 2026, but Malachi Toney is classified in 2025. What does that mean for the Miami Hurricanes, and what is he going to bring to the table? My friends, we got our boy Blue with us. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Keep it locked. I'm only getting started with FanDuel. Folks, you've heard us talk about FanDuel here on the Locked On Network. It's America's #1 sports book. I'm having so much fun. All the college games. You got Miami minus 16.5 this week. That's a big number. But we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. That is an opportunity. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. We are also proudly brought to you by Roy. This is a revolutionary service, guys. Have you heard about Roy? It stands for Return on You, and it's a new platform that lets you, the fans, get involved in NIL like never before by making contributions directly to your favorite athletes. By supporting players directly, you can help shape rosters, retain talent, and keep your favorite athletes out of the transfer portal. As you know, NIL has changed the game for athletes, and Roy changes the NIL game for the fans. Fans' contributions are securely held and are only distributed if the athlete makes the decision that aligns with the fan's support. If not, the money is returned to the fan. By using Roy, fans not only support athletes financially, but also become part of their name, image, and likeness journey, helping them succeed both on and off the field. Download Roy for iOS or Android and enter our referral code Locked On, and you'll automatically be entered into a sweepstakes to win $5,000 cash. Visit joinroy.com for additional details. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Get off the sidelines and into the NIL game with Roy. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. For your next listen, make sure you check out Locked On ACC. Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack and I host that show. We take you around the conference. Now there's, stories about a potential settlement to keep Florida State and Clemson in for another 6 years. Kenton and I will be breaking that down. We talk about all the games, but here on Locked On Canes, we are joined by Larry Bluestein. Blue, I would imagine you have watched a lot of Malachi Toney over the years, stud American heritage receiver who has been verbally committed to Miami, but made the announcement earlier this week he's reclassifying from the class of 2026 to class of 2025. I would imagine he must be very good in the classroom to be able to graduate a year early. Talk to us, though, also about what Malachi Toney does on the field.
From the moment he got to Heritage, as a freshman, he was in instant impact on national TV against Los Alamitos, California, in that Broward County showcase. Caught a couple of touchdown passes, showed that, hey, wait a minute, this kid's a freshman, and look what he's accomplishing. He did this at youth football. He's continued to be amazing. Saw him a couple of weeks ago against Chaminade Madonna. Caught a couple of long passes. He's as they say, he's it. He's definitely one of those guys that can change the momentum of a game because of his speed, his athleticism, and ability to get open and catch the ball. He'll play slot at the next level. And obviously, following in the footsteps of, guys like Xavier Restrepo and certainly Ray Joseph and, bringing him in to also compete. He could kick return if he needs. He's punt return. Just a versatile guy. I think Miami had plans for him for 16, which means they haven't really been pursuing, a 26 guy, rather. I keep saying 16. Pursuing a 26 slot kid. Now I think they could probably go after Jason Lopez from Chaminade-Madonna, because they didn't want to bring in two 2026 slots, especially with all the talent. But yeah, he comes aboard. He's gonna force his way in there for some playing time, because remember, most likely Xavier Restrepo will be gone, and it's going to be kind of in the hands of somebody like Ray, and maybe if they get a portal kid. But yeah, he's a guy that I'm sure when he announced that he was going to reclassify, there was a lot of people that were really happy in Coral Gables.
Does he, does he have like the physical maturity? Because he's going to be a year younger. So when he arrives at Miami in 25, is he going to be ready to get some reps?
Yeah, I think he will. He's good. When you have that much talent, you have that much athleticism. He's a confident kid. You look at him, he's getting bigger and stronger all the time. His ceiling I don't think he's going to get a lot taller, but he's going to put on weight, and you look at some of these players, and I don't think anybody's ever said the things that they said about Restrepo, coming out of high school or, going into high school. Oh, he's too slow. He's too short. He's too this. He's too that. See, I think from the beginning, Malachi really established himself as a high school football talent, coming out of youth football. The thing is, you look back at Restrepo and, he went to Monarch, and then he went to St. Thomas. And then when he found out he, needed to graduate early and get on campus, he went to Deerfield Beach. And he was a really productive kid, but not like Malachi coming out. Malachi was one of those guys, that is only going to improve himself. And imagine if his ceiling is just amazing, and I only compare him to Zay because of the fact that they're coming in at the same positions. They're coming out of high school, locally. And when you have that competition, you play that competitive level. A lot of college coaches, they want to see you. And, example of James Franklin from Penn State coming down last week, on his off week to watch some of the South Florida talent, a receiver, a DB, whatever it was. He just see those college coaches know, that sure, you could get kids from around the country to play, Alex, but when you need the dogs and you need these athletic dogs who played nothing but competitive football since they were 8, that's the guy you go after, because and that's, you see, he's, like I said, when Malachi, most 9th graders, are going to kind of like be platooned or sit the bench. But when you come in day one, first game against a national power like Los Alamitos, and you're in the starting lineup and you're productive and more than productive, yeah, that's the difference between Florida talent and anywhere else.
I love that. And so with Tony reclassifying, Miami has 2 receivers committed for 2025, Dalen Upshaw and now Tony, and Miami's still going after some others, Blue. I know that they've been very active with Joshua Moore, who's committed to Florida. Of course, there's, an uncertain future for Billy Napier right now with the Gators. And it also seems like Miami is not giving up on Tyler Williams, who's, committed to Georgia. Flipping guys from Georgia is not easy, but with the Armwood connection, with Williams now being at Armwood and Gerard Pringle being a pretty solid Miami commit, and Miami is also trying to lock in Kellen Wiley, the linebacker. Talk to us a little bit about Tyler Williams and Joshua Moore, what you've seen from these guys in state.
Well, Tyler just got to Ironwood. He was at school right on the coast, Riverview, Sumner program that lost a lot of kids because they had their coach left, and but he's a big time kid, no doubt. I mean, he was big time last year during his junior year, and a quality type of football player that a lot of people look at. Joshua Moore is not just the typical receiver. He's a big body kid, 6 foot. He's a lot like the kid Wilson. They're both 6'3.5" type guys. The thing that you got to like about Josh Moore is he's almost got a tight endish body, but better speed. And he's a great route runner. He's a tight, because sometimes when you get these kids that are bigger, they just do, and this is, not the same position, but John Vilma told me that when he got into college, the toughest thing for him to do is to learn how to tackle, because in high school, all he did was push kids down. Well, here's a guy like, you take a look at Joshua Moore, and sometimes when you're that big and you're strong, you don't really have to run routes, but that's his strong suit. He knows how to run routes, and he's a man child. And a lot of people overlooked him, because they didn't get a chance to see him. And that's the one thing about recruiting. And I could thank, the good Lord above that I get to see these kids, and I get to see them close up and personal, whether they go to West Broward or whether they go to St. Thomas. I get a chance to see them. And you see things about these players, and that's route running. And a lot of people don't know that, they just see him as a big body kid, but watch him in a game and his precision route running, and not to put him at the same level, but he reminds me of Chris Carter in the fact that, they were both, physical freaks, but Chris never took for granted that he could just beat people because he was fast and all that. He learned how to run routes, and he probably was one of the best of all time, he and Jerry Rice, at doing it. And, those are marquee kids. And I think that Josh has that type of ability. Great kid, great teammate as well. And, he could have jumped ship two years in a row, went to a marquee school and stayed out at West Broward and Pembroke Pines because he wants to be the team player. And that's exactly, you get that. Florida right now has that kid, and that kid's a big time kid. And if Miami flips him, Miami will have that major, target, because obviously there's going to be kids coming and going over the next couple of years at the wide receiver position, and he's going to be one of those guys, when Jacoby leaves, you get him in there, he's going to be that big body kid that it's going to be awfully tough for any safety to cover. And cornerbacks are not as big as they used to be. So we'll see.
Well, tremendous as always. You guys want to check out Larry's coverage at Prep Red Zone Florida, at Prep Red Zone FL on X. Check out Blue Monday nights on 560 WQAM, and also on the Sixth Ring Canes podcast. This man is all over the state. Blue, we thank you so much for your time, and have a great rest of your week.
Appreciate that, Alex. Thanks.
Folks, when we come back, we are gonna talk with a USF alum, and one who's not hiding, because most of you guys are hiding behind burner accounts and avatars. Tito Banach from Action Network will join us next. You want to keep it locked right here. My friends, the only ticket app that I use is GameTime. I tend to procrastinate. GameTime rewards me for that because the prices to your favorite sporting events, concerts, they get lower on the GameTime app the closer you get. It's incredible. And GameTime has a new feature called GameTime Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. GameTime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Folks, I love the all-in pricing feature, which shows you the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. On GameTime, you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. The GameTime lowest price guarantee means GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference if you find tickets in the same section and row for less. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? It's game time. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I have found the only USF alum who is not hiding behind a burner account. He is willing to stand in the paint and talk about the Bulls versus the Hurricanes this weekend. He's a producer at Action Network. He's also a very good friend of mine. He used to work with me in radio. Tito Banach is with us. So, Tito, just so people know, like, this is not a hostage situation. You did attend and possibly even graduate from USF. Is that correct?
I did. Yes. I am an esteemed USF Bull graduate, finished there in 2017, went out on a high note when they were kind of actually having some pretty good seasons. It's been a while since then, but now it seems like under Alex Golish, they've kind of found some success again, but also born and raised in Miami. So this is a tough situation for me, but I'm here to provide some analysis.
Yeah, and listen, from where I sit, I could see this potentially being the toughest test Miami has faced so far, and that includes, the Florida game. We all know USF, they kept it very close with Alabama and Tampa last year. The game was closer than it looked in the final score against Bama on the road this year. And, Bama did have a lot of turnovers, but then you could say, well, did USF force them into making those turnovers? So, from where you sit, heading into this game, Miami's on the road at Raymond James Stadium. What do you think are the biggest threats that the USF Bulls are going to pose to the Miami Hurricanes?
Yeah, look, I think you kind of laid it out. I think this is probably one of the most competent team Miami will face to this point in terms of the season. And I think this is undeniably probably the best offense Miami is going to face to the point in this season. Byrum Brown for USF is a pretty athletic quarterback. Last year, he was very, very successful for USF, and he returns with a lot of the same returning production for the Bulls. And I think that's a big source of the confidence on their side. Through the air this season, it hasn't looked that great, but they are a rushing attack, and Alex Golish isn't afraid to use Byrum Brown as a mobile kind of power rushing quarterback, a lot of designed runs. And so I think that, like you mentioned, is kind of where USF can really make this game difficult for Miami. It's a veer and shoot offense. And not only is it a veer and shoot offense, they operate quickly. They want to get the ball out quick and they want to get it into space quickly, which is going to really be a test on Miami's secondary. I don't think, thus far through 3 games, I think it's Florida, FAMU, and Ball State. None of them have really kind of tested Miami's secondary just yet. I know, obviously against Florida, Miami handled that challenge very well. And then FAMU and Ball State, we can kind of cross that off as, Miami's significantly better than both teams. I think USF has the players and the scheme to really kind of put Miami's defense in some positions where guys are going to have to make plays one-on-one. So I think that's where I think USF has the most ability to make this a game, which is if their offense gets humming and Miami has a difficulty kind of keeping up with the pace of that offense, I think this can be a very tight game.
Now, on the flip side, I don't know statistically how much of this gets skewed because USF's played Alabama so far, which,
Right.
only 3 games is going to skew your stats a little bit. But the defensive numbers for the Bulls are not that impressive. They're 51st against the run, 94th against the pass. They did give up a lot of passing yards to Southern Miss last week, which was a little surprising. So, I look at that and I say, okay, Cam Ward, let's see what you can do. Do you think that's an area where Miami can exploit the Bulls?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think, last year USF's defense was a bottom 120 unit. It was very, very poor. And the belief was that through the transfer portal, through another year in the system, Todd Orlando and this USF defense would improve. And I think in some facets, some facets, it has, a lot more turnovers forced this year. That's undeniable. And against Southern Miss, to your point, Southern Miss was moving the ball. However, when it came down to the red zone, one thing led to another, and there was a turnover here, turnover there. And so those, like you said, those stats can look a little bit skewed. Undeniably, I think Miami's offense has looked great thus far through the season. And I think USF's defense is the main weak point here. I think through 3 games, does it look better than last year? Sure, I would agree with that. But I think, Miami is going to be probably the best offense USF faces maybe the entire year, and I think that containing a guy like Cam Ward in theory seems easy, but Cam Ward has shown a real ability to kind of layer the throws all across the field. And that's where I think this is going to be the toughest test for USF's defense. This is going to be not only making sure we have Cam Ward kept and contained in the pocket, but also making sure that we are keeping up with Xavier Restrepo, Jacoby George, and all these receivers. So I'm curious to see how USF kind of responds to that. I know for the most part, USF's rush defense has kind of it's looked like hot and cold thus far. I mean, they gave up 199 to Alabama. I think 30 or 40 of those came on one big run there late in the fourth quarter. But for the most part, I would argue this is also going to be the best offensive line USF has ever faced with Miami's, with CeCe Malagoa, and Jalen Rivers supposed to be back for Miami. So I'm really curious to see how USF kind of schemes against Miami's offense and Shannon Dawson. A lot of playmakers on that side of the ball. And, to your point, Dono, in that Alabama game, USF's defense was holding its own, right? Alabama couldn't run the football. And a part of that was two things. Number one, no push in the center of the line for Alabama, which is crazy to say. For the past 20 years, that feels like a constant. But Alabama's right tackle was, I believe, a true freshman who had 6 or 7 either illegal procedure or holding penalties during that game. Miami's defensive line is no slouch. We know that with Tyler Barron. We know that with Elijah Alston. And so I think this is another situation where Miami's really, really going to see what they can do when it comes to pushing the football down USF's throat by running it. I'm curious to see how USF responds to that.
It should be great crowd at Raymond James. They're opening up the upper deck. Obviously there's a ton of enthusiasm from the USF side. I know a lot of Miami fans who are traveling to that game. What's your final prediction? How do you think the game ends?
Oof, it's tough. I think, look, I think the only way Miami loses this game is if it's a comedy of errors on both sides of the ball. What does that mean? That means Cam Ward maybe has an interception or a fumble or two, and the run game is just non-existent. And then defensively, USF kind of gets some momentum either early or late that leads to consecutive scores. If I had to put a number on it, I kind of lean towards Miami potentially winning this game 38-21, close to the spread. I believe Miami's a 60.5-point favorite. But I just have a hard time believing that this USF defense has fully turned around. I think the other part of it is USF's offense, while, potent and can strike quickly, I think it kind of leans sometimes into the going nowhere fast. And what I mean by that is very quick 3-and-outs that leaves your defense back on the field. And if you're Mario Cristobal and the Miami Hurricanes, when you have a Damian Martinez, a big offensive line, you're going to want to take advantage of those possessions, and you're going to want to make that defense stay on the field for a long time. So I as much as I love my USF Bulls, I kind of feel like this is one game where maybe they hang around for the first 3 quarters again and Miami maybe pulls away late. But I have Miami coming out on top, unfortunately. Fortunately.
That is very well said. But the most important thing I have to ask you, because you've lived in both Miami and Tampa, and one thing that the citizens of these great cities, they argue a lot over the Cuban sandwiches, right? I mean, Tampa, they claim to, and maybe they did, invent the Cuban sandwich. That's a big thing. I feel like Miami perfected it.
Yeah.
Who's got the better Cuban sandwich, Tito, as someone who's lived both places?
Yeah, so I'll be honest. We talked about this just right before on air. I'm not a huge Cuban sandwich guy. I think the Cuban sandwich is not even the best Cuban affiliated sandwich, and we can go through that list, if you want to. Pan con lechon, medianoche, a frita. I would take all those over a Cuban sandwich. That being said, in regards to the Tampa versus Miami debate, I just can't get past the fact that the Tampa Cuban sandwich has salami. It doesn't feel proper. It does not feel proper in any sense. I don't really get it. Also, it's kind of like one of those things that's said but not seen, because in my 4 years in Tampa, I never really saw any like significant advertisements for Cuban sandwiches. Maybe I wasn't in the right places, but I know that, in Miami, you can't drive anywhere without a restaurant claiming that they have the best Cuban sandwich.
That's true. You can't drive 3 blocks. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And so I kind of lean, I find it hard to believe that Tampa is the place for the Cuban sandwich. If they want to make that their claim to fame, I'd let them, because I don't think that sandwich is that good anyways, but I'm going to rock with Miami on that.
Well, the gauntlet has been thrown. Tito Benach, we thank you so much for joining us. You see where you follow him on X, it's literally his name, at Tito Benach, and he does awesome stuff with Action Network. Tito, thank you so much for the time, man, and I know you're going to be a little torn this weekend, so at least one way or another, a team you've rooted for is going to win.
Yeah. I'm definitely excited, and it should be a good game. I'm hoping so.
Love it. Huge thanks again to Larry Bluestein for joining us, to Tito. And folks, we'll talk to you again tomorrow on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.